Hello, this is your history for Monday, March 23rd. And we started talking about Garfield's um, personal history last week, and we talked a little bit about his wife, Crete, or Lucretia. And we talked about his background and who he was. And we talked a little bit about what's going to happen, but I want to give you a fuller view of that today. So remember, events of Garfield's presidency, I have 1881. Why do I just have 1 year? Because he was assassinated in the very first year. So it was a short term. Unfortunately, this is someone that I think probably could have done a great deal of good and had a lot of influence. So it makes you wonder. It's kind of one of those what ifs. Okay, so a little bit about what was going on. The Republican Party had split into two groups, the stalwarts and the half breeds. Um, the leader of the stalwarts is a man whose name I want you to know. His name is Roscoe Conkling, and he was known as a political boss. And these were the guys who had gotten into power and into a political position. And then they were basically moving things around like a chessboard. And they were the ones that said they had the power. So if you wanted anything done, you needed to come through them. And so they were basically controlling a lot of the presidents and a lot of the people that would get elected, a lot of the bills that would be passed. And these were not necessarily men that were looking out for the good of the country. A lot of their thinking was, how can I benefit? And they were making money off of this. And they were putting people in high positions that they wanted to be there and that were doing good for them, not the country. So Roscoe Conkling is not necessarily a good name, but it is a name that had a lot of power during these years. So I would say from Grant, Hayes, all along these lines. Garfield was determined to fight these guys. And I put in here, I want you to know the term political bosses. He was determined to fight them. And when he got into office, Roscoe Conkling and a lot of his other, I call them cronies. That's kind of the word you call people when it's like your buddies, but you're kind of talking about someone who just follows along with what you want him to do. Wanted him to put in all these stalwarts into office, and they almost expected him to. I don't know if it was because they had so much power or whatever, but he started hiring people from the other part of the party, the half breeds. Oh, this did not fly well with these guys. Okay, they all kinds of threatening. They put out things in the newspaper about him. They showed, hey, he's done this, he's done this. They started trying to block all of his bills that went through the House. But Garfield was determined not to give in to these guys. And so he kept standing his ground. Nope, I'm not going to give. Nope, I'm not going to cave. Nope, you can't have what you want. So, and I love this. It's funny. Conkling said, oh, I have a misspelling there. That should be Conkling. Conkling said, fine, I'll just resign. I'll show you. Okay, thinking that everything would kind of stop or that he would be begged to come back. Okay, whatever. So he says, I resign. Look what I put there. Yay, good, go, I'm glad. Okay, now this is funny because this comes back to get him. He thinks when Garfield is assassinated and he dies, Conkling's buddy is Chester A. Arthur, who is the vice president and who becomes president. So Conkling thinks, oh, yay, he's in now, okay, when Arthur becomes president. But Arthur has a little bit more to say about it. So I'm going to hold you in suspense on that for a while until we get to him. But because Arthur's a very interesting character, so I want you to keep thinking about him. By the way, I hope you're still looking in your own books and finding information that I'm missing or not mentioning. Okay, so Conklin decides to resign, say, fine, if you won't do it my way, I leave. And I say, me, this is Mrs. Barnett, good riddance. Leave if you feel that way. And it was actually good that he did. Okay, so he leaves. Charles Guto, who was a stalwart, so this was the party of the guy I was just talking about, Roscoe Conkling, um, and Chester A. Arthur, who was the vice president, felt like he was called, inspired to kill the president. That was his calling, and he knew he would probably be arrested and killed. But that was what his job was going to be. He was going to get Garfield out of the office and make Arthur president. By the way, this guy was also crazy. Okay, there was a lot of things that showed he was just not right. And one of the reasons that this guy was also angry is he also felt, and this shows you why he's just not a little right in the head. He felt like somehow he was um, that he should have a job in the government. He felt like was destined to have some kind of great job. And so he was like stalking the White House for a while, always being in, trying to meet Garfield, being in the line to shake his hand. Remember, the White House was open at this time, and lots of people would come in and wait in line to talk to the president. And he was one of these. And he had asked for jobs, he had asked for appointments, and he had been turned down one after the other, after the other, after the other. Because he was crazy. I've already told you that. Okay. So he's like, I didn't get my job. This guy's in my way. And so he follows him around for a while, trying to figure out when the best moment is to kill him. Remember, I told you that Lucretia got very sick and she went to New Jersey to kind of go to the seaside and recuperate. One of the times he was planning on shooting Garfield, he was following him and he saw him with Lucretia, and Lucretia was leaning on his arm and she seemed so weak and so helpless that Guto actually held back and didn't shoot at that moment and didn't keep him from the other time. But so Garfield, this is July 2nd, right before 4th of July. He was in the train station and he was on his way to be reunited with Lucretia and see her. And they were going to be together for the 4th of July. And he was in the train station, and Guto comes from behind and shoots him, one that grazes his arm and one that hits his back. And like I've told you before, this did not instantly kill him, and these were not fatal wounds. He should have healed from them. He should have gotten better. But because they instantly kept him where he was, which was in a dirty train station, they called the doctors in. The doctors start opening him up, sticking their fingers in, trying to get the bullet out, poking and prodding, everybody coming in. This was not a time, we're being told to wash our hands every 5 seconds. This was a time they probably didn't even wash their hands before they went into surgery. They didn't wash their instruments every time. Germs and the whole idea of being sanitary was just coming into play at this time. And doctors who were taking it seriously and talking about these unseen things that could kill us called germs were considered crazy. Remember, what is essential is invisible to the eye. You cannot see a germ, but it is absolutely essential. Okay, and we know that that's why we're stuck at home, right? They're real. And so these people start poking and prodding and digging in him, and they cause infections that lead to blood poisoning that eventually kills him. 2.5 months later, Alexander Graham Bell was even called in to he tried to invent a metal detector that would locate the bullet. He was having some success with metal detectors, and but they wouldn't move him from his bed, and his bed frame was metal, and so the metal detector kept reacting to the frame he was in, and so he was having difficulty locating the bullet. And it continued to stay lodged in there and continued to cause infection. And he died on September 19th, 1881, of blood poisoning, of a wound that should have been fixed, that should have not been fatal. And a lot of people blame the doctors because they were just trying to be well known. They were trying to be the one that saved the president, and so lots of people tried to get involved. There's all kinds of things going on. You know by now that um, humanity is not simple. Our, our key word today is complicated. Life and situations, and it's complicated, right? We all have motives, we all have thoughts, and they're all fighting with each other. And so we see that this really causes harm. This is one of the more well known paintings of possibly of Garfield's shooting in the train station. Okay, so unfortunately, that's kind of the end of Garfield. And so, meanwhile, some other things, and we're only dealing with 1 year, so I can't, I'm not going to go pages and pages, but there are a few things going on here. Meanwhile, Clara Barton, who was a nurse in the Civil War, founds the American Red Cross. Now, this is not the only Red Cross. She had gone overseas and met with some people that had a Red Cross in Switzerland, I believe, and so they were talking to her about starting an American organization. And the Red Cross is a group of people who will meet medical needs in emergency type situations. Now, America didn't really know what to do with this. They thought it was just helpful in the Civil War, and they didn't expect themselves to ever be in a war again. But the American Red Cross proved themselves useful during floods, natural disasters, and other problems that occurred, and not just wartime. And they still are around and still helpful. They're probably doing a lot of good right now as we speak. You can look that up and see maybe what some branches of the American Red Cross are up to right now. I'm gonna write that down. I didn't look that up. I'm gonna look them up and see what's going on with them right now during this pandemic. Okay, Booker T. Washington founded the Normal School for Colored Teachers that was later to be called Tuskegee Institute. And he founded this school to help Black Americans to learn a trade so that they could have a living. So a lot of these people would have been former slaves. And what he was noticing is his people didn't have anything. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to earn a living. All they had done their whole lives was work for someone else. And so he wanted to train, he was a Black man also, and he wanted to train others to have a skill that they could use and be paid for. And so he opened this school. Eventually, he hires a teacher named George Washington Carver, who Caleb knows a lot about and who we saw in our wax museum. And he brings some recognition to the school also when he comes. We also have not someone that was in our wax museum, but someone that was associated with a couple of the people that we had. We had some Wild West characters in our wax museum. This is Billy the Kid, who was an outlaw and a gunfighter. He was known to shot and killed 8 men, and he was shot and killed at 21 years old. It's interesting because when you think of these people, I think of them as much older, but this was a young guy, and he was killed at 21. We also have Sitting Bull. Okay, now if you remember a while back, I was telling you about Custer's Last Stand. Well, Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse were two of the leaders that led their people against Custer and killed Custer and all of his men that were trying to move them away. Sitting Bull was trying to work against the government that was pushing him out of land that had been promised to him. Not him, but his people had been promised reservation land, but then there was gold found on that land. So settlers started coming in and moving in on this land, and the government just starts pushing the Indians off and forcing them off and not giving them what they had promised. And so that's part of what led to Custer's last stand. And then after that, the government was even more so after Sitting Bull and his people. So he leads some of his people into Canada to get away. Well, after a while, they were running out of resources, they were running out of food, they didn't have anything, and they were forced to come back into the United States. And when they did, and he had to surrender, and he knew that he didn't have anything. As the train came in, um, it moved all the buffalo off of their land. People came in and just started shooting all the buffalo. They were carrying them back east for skins, and they were just coming out in expeditions and shooting them for fun. Well, this was the Indians' way of life. And so now they were being basically forced to go to these reservations and depend on the government for their living, because what they knew as their living they couldn't depend on anymore. People were moving out west and slowly pushing them out. And so he came back. He came to the United States, surrendered. He was promised that his surrender would be accepted in peace. He was actually put in prison as a prisoner of war for 2 years. He was released after 2 years to his people's reservation. And then he did some travel with the Buffalo Bill Show, who had people like Annie Oakley. Sitting Bull got to know Annie Oakley really well and liked her a lot. They traveled around. She did sharpshooting, and he would come out on a horse or whatever, and in his Indian dress. And he did that for a while, and then went back home. So kind of sad when I want you to think about all the things going on in this time. Okay? This is the 1880s. We have people still moving out west. Lots. Now that we have the train, we have more and more and more and more people. I'm reading a Dear America book right now about a girl whose family is Italian, and their family heard about all this land out west, and there was this actually community that was forming. And so her dad put them on the train, and they had to go on the train all the way to a certain point. Then they get off of the train, like in Utah, which is as far as the train went, and then they had to get in covered wagons and go the rest of the way to Idaho, and where they're going to have this little community set up to help each other and to work together. And I'm about halfway through the book. I'll let you know how it turns out. But that's still going on right now. You have the Indians slowly the Indian wars are dying off. You have more and more of the Indians just basically waving the white flag of surrender and going to the reservations, which I see as kind of sad. Like, we took a people that had a way of living and forced them to be and do something else instead of working with them. And a lot of it was because we thought we were better and we had it figured out and they should just be like us. It's unfortunate. You also have the Wild West kind of period. So Billy the Kid is on here. You have outlaws. You have the saloons. You have all of that going on right now. Pony Express isn't any longer because we have the transcontinental telegraph. We also have the railroad, so no longer need for the Pony Express. So we have a country that is changing in some ways slowly, but in other ways very, very quickly. We've got the light bulb. We've got Alexander Graham Bell with the telephone. It's going to take a few years for these things to really take hold and to become something that lots of people can use, but we see a nation that's changing. It's exciting. Okay, so for this video, I want you to comment below. I want you to get out your book and see if there's anything new that we can talk about in this time period. Look up 1880s. You can either mention something about Garfield, or something about this time that I miss talking about, or something you're looking forward to talking about that you think is coming soon, like an event in history that you think we're about to talk about. So talk about what you're interested in talking about. There's a few ways I'll let you respond today. All right, keep up the good work.